Now that we have a virtual machine scale set built and ready to go, let's go ahead and set up auto scaling. So in the properties of the virtual machine scale set, we'll come over to scaling and we'll click on enable auto scale. Now before I do this, I could basically do a manual scale here. I could change this to 4 or 8 or something like that. So there is the concept of manually scaling. And then in auto scaling, we can use metrics or we can use a schedule to scale based off those resources. So let's go ahead and check it out. We'll click on enable auto scale. We'll give this a name like auto scale, doesn't have to be anything particular. And then scrolling down the list here, we can see that we can start to build out rules. We were talking about rules earlier, and we've also got basically our capacity settings. We want a minimum of at least 1 server, or maybe a minimum of 2, and perhaps maybe a maximum of 4. And then we can set a default to 1, or we could set a default to 2 in this case. If we're doing high availability, we probably want 2 at a minimum no matter what, whether that's a minimum setting or a default. And with the capacity settings configured, let's go ahead and add a rule here. And this will be our scale out rule. So what we'll do here is take a look down the list. We've got our criteria, and this is where we can scale based on metrics. So we can say, hit the drop down list, and do we want to do percent CPU? Like how much CPU percentage are we currently running on the virtual machine? Do we want to key off some network metrics or some disk metrics? So you've got some basic options in here. And remember, you could always do custom metrics if you want to get more particular. For this example, I'll just stick with CPU. And what we'll say here is just to keep it simple. If the average CPU utilization is greater than something like 70% for a duration of 10 minutes, or maybe we change this to 5. If it reaches that condition, then we want to invoke this action here, which is increase the count of virtual machines. And you've got different options in here. You can say increase by a certain percentage, things like that. But let's just say this, we're going to increase the instance count by 1. And then we'll have a cooldown period of 5 minutes, meaning don't do any other actions until 5 minutes has passed. So we can make sure that that new server takes a little bit of the load off the existing servers that are already in the group. So click on add. And you can see this gives us a scale out rule because of the way we configured the rule. Let's add another one to scale in, because if we scale to a maximum of 4 and then the resource utilization drops down, we want the system to automatically correct. So what we could do is add another rule. And here what we'll do is same criteria, average CPU percentage, but the operator, instead of greater than, we're going to say less than. So if it's less than something like 50% for a period of 5 minutes, then we can go ahead and trigger another action, which is decrease the count by 1. Now, one of the things that you should keep in mind is that there's an art and a science to building these scale out and scale in rules. It's going to be very rare that on the first try it works exactly the way that you want it, so you're probably going to have to test this out a little bit in your own environment. So depending on the way users access your application and the way your application works, you may need to kind of adjust these numbers. So I'm just trying to give you an idea here, but keep in mind you'll need to test this out pretty thoroughly with your own application. Let's go ahead and click on add for that rule. And so you can see now we've got a scale out and a scale in rule based on the actions that are in the rule. And down here you can see there's a schedule option. So if we wanted to add a schedule, we could do that, but we're just going to stick with these 2 rules here. So we'll go ahead and click on save. And at that point, we're good to go. So that's basically the idea of creating the virtual machine scale set, setting up the auto scaling rules. Remember, if you create a scale out rule, you want to also create a scale in rule, because otherwise you'll eventually scale out to your maximum capacity and you'll never scale back down. Now this auto scaling interface is basically the same as it is in the app service environment. So maybe you're not using virtual machines. Maybe you're going more of the managed service route, more of a platform as a service offering, and you're working with managed web applications. So let's take a look in the next video how we would auto scale in that type of environment.